Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for helping on. My name is Ransom Onyema. I'm a final year radiography student, a medical writer, a YouTuber as well. Today I have an amazing guest speaker. Her name is Emma. She's based in the UK, and so I'll give her the pace to introduce herself. So, Emma, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah. So my name is Emma Leivesley. I'm a wellbeing and burnout coach, and I specifically help healthcare professionals. So I help doctors, nurses, other healthcare professionals with stress and burnout. I'm also the author of a book called The Sustainable Doctor Framework, which is a stress management guide for doctors.
Amazing. So we have a couple of questions for you to,
Mm-hmm.
answer and share narratives and for the audience to get enlightened the more.
Yeah.
So the first one is, what really inspired you to write that book, The Sustainable Doctor Framework? Tell us what really inspired you to write that book and how has it been received thus far by healthcare professionals in general. Talk us through.
Yeah. So I'd decided that I wanted to coach healthcare professionals because I was working within healthcare and I could see how stressed everybody was. And when I started coaching, I noticed that doctors were coming to me with specific problems to them. So, for example, because of the length of the training, there's a lot of competition, pressure, and conditioning that goes on. And doctors tend to have this belief that they're the ones that help people, they're not allowed to struggle themselves. So I developed a 12-week one-to-one coaching program specifically for doctors. And then I decided to write a book. And originally it was going to be for all healthcare professionals. But I decided that because doctors have those problems that other healthcare professionals don't tend to have, I would focus on them. And the reason why I chose doctors first was because I was reading some horrific statistics around suicide in doctors. So in the UK, female doctors were more likely to end their lives themselves. They're like 3 times more likely than the general population. And male doctors were more likely to end their own lives compared to other people, other males that had different jobs that earn a similar amount of money as them. So that got me to thinking there must be something about the job specifically that's causing doctors to do that. And that's why I decided to write the book. And because I think, due to this idea that doctors aren't allowed to struggle, they've got to openly be able to cope with everything, they're more likely to go to a shop and buy a book or go online and buy a book than they are to reach out and ask for help. Um, and it's a book that they've got that they can look back on whenever they need to. I've had a lot of really good feedback so far from doctors and other healthcare professionals that have read the book. Um, and it's been really good to see that it, as much as what I teach, sometimes they're aware of many of the things that are in the book. Having that written down in front of them is a not only a reminder, but it motivates them to change and to do something. And the one thing that makes me different compared to other people that work with stress and burnout is I don't brush under the carpet the systemic problems. So the culture of medicine and healthcare is as much to blame as people not looking after themselves because they're too busy working. So, if anything, I think the culture and the way that healthcare is it's more to blame than the individual. And as much as I can help each individual, unless the system changes, it's very, very difficult. So part of my process is paying it forward in the hope that it's going to change the system and the culture, as well as the individual doctor, like, getting help for themselves.
Amazing. Um, it's amazing that Emma, what really got me interested in your journey thus far is that you picked up a problem. You sussed out for a problem, and not just that you sussed out for the problem, you also sussed out the problem and also a solution for it.
Mm,
And stress is a very paramount, amongst doctors, healthcare professionals in general, and
mm.
it's amazing that you're trying to like bridge that gap. And yeah, if you're a medical doctor or any allied healthcare professional, and you're looking forward to purchasing this book, because I know definitely you're facing stress, you're being stressed in one way or the other. So this book is going to be available, is already available on Amazon, and so I'm going to recommend that you head over to Amazon and purchase that book. The link is going to be on the description below. So head over there to purchase that book because you really need it. You really, really need it. So thank you for that one, Emma. The second one, questions for you is, all right, tell us from your experience, what are some common signs that medical doctors, nurses, or allied healthcare professionals are heading towards burnout? Because I know there are going to be a lot of doctors and other healthcare professionals who watch this video. So talk us through from your experience how these professionals, are heading towards burnout in general.
Yeah, I mean, the early warning signs are the signs of stress, and it's chronic stress. So it's not just I've been stressed for a couple of days. It's this has continued for a very long period of time. But because stress is normalised within healthcare, it can slip in without you noticing. So the main things to look out for are things like feeling on edge all the time, not being able to relax, also things like insomnia. When the stress response is constantly activated, your immune system is reduced. So it could be that you're being ill quite a bit, you're catching a lot of viruses that are going around. Um, Muscle tension is another one. When I myself had chronic stress and ended up with burnout many years ago, I hadn't unclenched my jaw for a number of years, and I did have that insomnia too. And it's something that, looking back, I shouldn't have ignored. Um, and then there's being irritable, so snapping at people, and you can get things like headaches, digestive problems, um, unhelpful coping strategies. So things like drinking alcohol, smoking, taking drugs, overeating or not eating, and anything that's not very healthy in a way to cope. And then you really need to look out when you're feeling that exhaustion and apathy. So, not really interested in your job anymore. And then there's the anhedonia, so not enjoying the things that you used to enjoy doing. And those are the later signs that it's more likely to be burnout than stress. And it's definitely better to tackle stress before it gets to burnout, because burnout can take years to recover from. Myself, it took 3 years in total. And if you can get to it when it's chronic stress, it's a lot better for you, because burnout causes the mental health difficulties. Stress tends to be more of a physical problem, whereas burnout tends to be more of a mental health issue. So that's where the high risk of suicide comes in, because burnout just takes all your energy and all your motivation and everything away from you.
Amazing. You just remembered me something very crucial. The a recent news is flying around here in Nigeria. I guess it's international. A recent a young medical doctor, a long hours of work placement in hospital settings. He worked for close to 72 hours in a go.
Mm,
He had to, he collapsed and, died, so a lot of doctors online are now protesting protesting against working long hours,
yeah.
and that should be looked into, um, doctors, because it's also a gateway for being burned out. It's also common signs of doctors or other healthcare professionals heading towards burnout in general. So thank you for that one, Ima, and I believe that the doctors are gonna watch this video. They're really gonna be aware of the common signs of you know heading towards being burned out. Like you
Mhm.
talked about chronic stress in general. So the next question for you, Ima, is all right. So what practical initial steps can a busy healthcare worker proceed to start building more balance in their lives in general? What do you have to say about that?
The first thing is to realize that it's a normal human response to a difficult situation. A lot of my clients come to me and they think that they're broken, there's something wrong with them because they're not able to cope with this. But what they're actually doing, humans aren't supposed to do. They're not supposed to, like you mentioned, working for 72 hours. Human beings aren't supposed to do that. We're not built to do that. We need rest. And a lot of people, not just doctors, are conditioned to believe that if you're not being productive, then you're wasting your time, or it makes you somehow less successful if you stop being productive. And changing that attitude is very important. Rest is just as important as being productive. You're more productive when you rest. You're less likely to make mistakes. And this is something that I'm quite passionate about. People who drive for a living are made to take breaks because it's dangerous to drive when you've not had sleep. Why is it okay for doctors to work so long, such long hours without a break when people's lives are in their hands? And if doctors are more likely to make mistakes, then there's the risk of moral injury. So they feel that guilty because they've done something wrong, and that causes a whole heap of other problems. So acknowledging that rest is important is a big one, and feeling okay not being productive. So not feeling guilty for taking time out for yourself, because it's it's important not just for the individual but for everybody around them, the patients, the family. So it's not being selfish to look after yourself, to rest, and then start to build in healthy habits. So making sure you're doing the essentials. So everyone knows you're supposed to eat healthily, stay hydrated, and sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. But even if you know that, if you're in a job that does that to you, that keeps you working for so long, you can tend to neglect yourself. So it's taking back control of those basic things. So the sleep, eating healthily, and hydration. Also, regular exercise that isn't to do with work. So going for a walk, or um, going to the gym or something like that, can be really helpful. And also connecting with people outside of work. I think that's really, really important. I know myself when I've done, I mean, this was when I was doing 12-hour shifts, working in a mental health hospital. It is that where you're coming home so exhausted. It's like you pack yourself into a box until the next day, and you don't have any life outside of work, and you're not connecting with people. And we are social beings. We need that connection with people. And I think with doctors as well, I know in the UK, when doctors are doing the training posts, they can just be thrown to the other side of the country with not very much notice, and they've got to find somewhere to live, but they're being taken completely away from their support network. So connecting with others is really important, and having boundaries and saying, I can't take on anymore now because I'm exhausted, and feeling okay to say that, because if you don't protect your own energy, nobody else is going to do that for you. Because if you think of like, say, a hospital, if they're short staffed and they haven't got enough people, they're not going to care if you're tired. They're going to want you in to do the shift. There's only you that can look after your own well-being, and that's really sad. Employers should be looking after their staff's well-being, but unfortunately, as is evident, that's not happening.
Wow, amazing. These are. Thank you for that one, Ema. That was amazing. These are real practical initial steps that you narrated over there. Um, because doctors are usually very busy. I was speaking with a math student. I think in yeah, in Australia, and that was a few weeks ago, and she stated that uh, medicine is, if you're not careful with medicine, it could take everything about you. You might not have other interests like other extracurricular activities like creating content or doing other things. Like you said about not having any other life apart from your work. This is when business comes in, creeps in as a healthcare worker, and it starts leading to burnout. And
Mm.
but you stated practical steps in starting to building more balance life in the various activities as a healthcare professional. And I believe that other healthcare workers or doctors who are going to watch this video would definitely adhere to those um, real practical steps you narrated, and I believe that is going to impact them positively. Thank you for that one, Emo. The next question is, wait, how does your coaching, in general, approach different? Okay, hold on. Before I ask you this question,
Mhm.
do you coaching do you coach doctors that are stressed only in the UK, or do you diversify like in Africa or whatever?
No, I work worldwide, so
Okay.
anyone from around the world, yeah.
That gives me a proper perspective on that question for you. So how does your coaching in general approach, differ from traditional wellness or stress management advice? Because why I asked you that question is, there the way you're gonna coach a medical doctor who's trained in the UK. They got a lot of values. They got some different approaches because of the way you coached that UK-based medical doctor. It's going to be different from someone maybe in Nigeria who's a medical doctor. Are you going
Yeah.
to use the same approaches to coach them? That's another question in that same question I asked you. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, with coaching, it's very much about the individual in front of you and the experiences and what's happening for them. So I would always find out exactly what's going on for that person. And as much as I use a process, it's all very tailored to the individual. So everybody will find their own unique way of managing things. I have actually done quite a lot of work with an organisation that does various events for people over in Africa. So I've spoken at the World Health Summit in Liverpool, and there were a lot of people who attended from all over Africa. I'm actually doing some training for some teachers that are from Nigeria at the end of the month. So I do understand that culturally it's very different from Africa to the UK, but I think there's a lot of commonality. There's a lot that healthcare professionals around the world are experiencing that is the same across the world. But I will always ask the person what their experiences are, and I reality check everything. So if, for example, somebody said, okay, I'm going to take half an hour for my lunch break every day, I know for a fact that that is impossible for quite a lot of people, myself included, when I used to work for the NHS. So I reality check everything with everybody and make sure that that's actually realistic, that they'd be able to do that. And we look at what the likely consequences of actions would be as well. But the one thing that I really, the basis that I work from is that it's based on reality. So there's a lot of people that say, oh, you should just be more resilient, when resilience isn't the idea that people should have everything thrown at them and keep going. Resilience is, I learn from something, so I change how I do it and I keep going. And I think what we've got is a global problem, is that the idea of resilience has been hijacked, and it's now taken the meaning of you're going to do more, you're going to work more hours, and if you can't cope, it means you're not resilient. Doctors are resilient. The training that they go through, just the things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis, the life and death situations that they're working with all the time, it takes a very resilient person to do that. So what I want to do is reclaim resilience, and rather than it being a stick to blame the doctors with, it's actually, by being resilient, I'm realizing that this isn't working and we need to do this another way. And I think that's really important, because things can't go on as they are. I read on LinkedIn just before that we're losing a lot of doctors in the UK because they're going elsewhere because of the stress that UK doctors are under at the moment, for many, many different reasons. And I know from speaking to a lot of doctors who qualified in other countries that have come over to the UK, they're struggling to find jobs at the moment. There's a shortage of doctors here in the UK, but there's a lot of unemployed doctors too. And I don't think that's fair on the qualified doctors who can't work, but I also don't think it's fair on those who are working. Clearly there's a shortage. The numbers aren't working out. So they're going to be under so much more pressure because they're doing the job of many, many people. And I know that that's definitely the case abroad too, specifically in Africa, that the understaffing. And the danger of that is as well, is that if you feel lucky to have a job, you don't want to say no to things because you worry about what the impact could be. And unless more people start making a stand against that, it's going to carry on. And once you can prove to somebody that you've dealt with all of this during one day, it isn't well done for doing that. It's, oh, here's some more, and do more. And that is a cycle that needs to be broken.
Mm,
And
mm,
I think it's interesting that you were saying there that the people are protesting, doctors are protesting against that. And I think that's something that really needs to happen. And I don't like the idea that people are putting the blame of the individual doctors and other healthcare professionals from them being stressed. I think if anyone were to do that kind of job with these kind of conditions, they're going to be stressed and burnt out, because we're human, we're all human. And me telling somebody to go and meditate and, like, say, I don't know, eat 5 vegetables a day, it's not enough. There's many cogs to make a watch tick, and you need to look at the whole person and apply changes in many different areas of life. And I think that that's sometimes not really touched on, because burnout is seen as a workplace problem, but burnout doesn't just affect you at work, it affects your entire life. And your life influences your work, and your work influences your life. And I think that we really need to be taking a holistic approach with this. And a lot of the doctors that come to me as clients, they pretty much all of them tell me they don't feel supported at work. They don't feel like they have anyone they can talk to if they're struggling. And they'll raise concerns, but nothing gets done about it. And I think that needs to change too.
Amazing, Emma. That was amazing. It's what really gets me intrigued is how you know balance those equations in working with different types of doctors, with different types of ethnic groups, or different types of values and cultures, and you're
Yeah.
still blending. That's amazing, because I don't know, different belief system is is also applicable in your coaching, because
Mm.
the like what we believe in Nigeria, and how it's going to work for us in the healthcare sector is quite different, from the belief systems in the healthcare sector in the UK. So
Mm-hmm.
before I proceed to the last question,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm going to ask you this last question, and what together with the question I have for you. All
Mm-hmm.
right. So let's use the last question. If you could give one piece of advice to a healthcare professional who's working right now, struggling to keep calm in the middle of a stressful shift,
Mm-hmm.
what would that be? Again, that's the last question. So the next question in that question
Mm-hmm.
is, how do you deal with toxic clients with a different belief system? Because everything, your work you're doing is amazing, right? But you're gonna face a couple of challenges. I know you've
Mm-hmm.
you've, you've got a lot of challenges in your work, man. Because like you said, you worked in the healthcare sector, in the mental health department, the NHS, and you face a couple of challenges. So talk us through on how you deal with toxic, because there are some doctors that believe systems quite different for what you offer on the table. So how do you cope with them, together with
Mm.
that question I asked you?
Yeah, I mean, what I do first of all is to get them to reflect on their life, how it currently is, and how they're responding to stress. So we look at whether the coping strategy they're using is adaptive, so helpful, maladaptive, or not coping. And then we look at what they're doing outside of work and how satisfied they are with all the different aspects of their life. One thing that I do is to look at their individual values. And obviously, everyone's different depending on not just where you're from and your family, but how, like, your early life experiences too. And the majority of people who I know who've gone to be a doctor have gone in to be a doctor because they wanted to help people. And I know in other cultures it could be that, okay, the families put all of their money into educating this child, and the child, like, everything's on them. They've got to succeed, do well, and that's a lot of pressure to put on them. So with people who are doing the job because maybe it's not been their choice, we look at what their values are. So that doesn't necessarily mean that their only value is I must do well, I must make money. It could be that, well, actually, I do want to help people, or it could be that they like being a position of authority, or so we'd look at each individual's values and then look at, okay, am I living my values? So generally when people want to help other people, when they're in a system where they can't help people the same way that they want to, that causes a conflict, and that's a big source of stress. So we look at coping strategies around that. So reframing. So rather than people taking on, like, okay, I work in a busy ward and we can't see to all the people, and that being a personal failure, it's looking at that and thinking, well, actually, it's not my fault that this is the way that it is, and that there's too many patients per doctor. So it is very much looking at the values of that individual person and what they are, and that's the true values, not what they think they are in a lot of cases. Because I think that even if going into medicine wasn't your particular career choice, to be able to do that job, it takes those qualities, that wanting to help people, and the healer mentality. And I think that a lot of people, once they realise that, it does take a bit of that pressure off. But another thing that we have to do is, with people who have been working so hard from a very early age, it's a lot more difficult to get them to, I was saying before, see rest as productive. Because a lot of people, their academic achievements and their work is how they assess their own worth. So it's about them seeing themselves other than being a doctor. So whether that's a father, mother, friend, a role in a community, by doing that, it kind of opens up the world a little bit. Because when you work in medicine, sometimes, as we said before, everything can be just about work and nothing else. So once people tend to start to explore the other aspects of themselves, I think that does take pressure off and makes them see themselves as a human rather than a doctor who just has to work and get on with it.
Amazing. That was fabulous, Ima. Thank you for that one. And these are amazing nuggets that you dropped right there. That a struggling healthcare professional that's gonna watch this video, and how to, in that phase of struggling, and how to keep calm in the middle of chaos.
Mhm.
During also stressful shifts as well. Thank you so much for that one.
Mhm.
Thank you for time today, Ima. We've come to
No,
the end of the session. So if you're wanting to reach out to Ima, connect with Ima, her details will be on the YouTube description below. And do well to purchase her book, and do well to follow her up, because she's really doing amazing well in the healthcare sector. And she's a problem solver. She solved out, like I said before, she soft out a problem, and also sussed out for the solution. So she's amazing. She's really, really amazing. So do well to watch this video to the end. Do well to like, share, comment, share to your network. If your other colleagues as well, who are all you know always battling with burnout, please share this video to them so that they can see there is a solution for it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Ima.
thank you.